Back in 2007, a film just appeared online. It went on to be seen by millions, and boy, did it spark some intense debate. It's called Zeitgeist, and its claims were absolutely staggering. So today, we're going to dive in and just neutrally unpack the arguments of this really influential film. Right from the jump, the film sets this really provocative tone with quotes like this one. It's basically telling you, hey, this isn't just a documentary. It's positioning itself as a kind of awakening, a reveal of hidden truths that it claims have been kept from us on purpose. And this is the massive question at the heart of the whole film. It looks at the very foundations of our world, religion, major historical events, even our financial systems, and suggests that maybe, just maybe, they aren't what we think they are at all. So to really get a grip on this thing and understand its impact, we're going to break it down into its three distinct parts. We're going to look directly at the claims it makes, one by one. All right, so the film kicks things off by going after one of the biggest pillars of Western civilization, Christianity. And its big argument is that the story of Jesus is not historically unique, not even close. So what's the big idea here? Well, the film claims that the story of Jesus is basically a mashup, a blend of astrology, specifically sun worship, and story elements that were straight up borrowed from much, much older pagan religions. To try and prove this, the film points to the Egyptian sun god Horus, who came thousands of years before Jesus. And then it just lists all these supposedly striking parallels, that Horus was also born on December 25th of a virgin, that he had 12 disciples, was crucified, buried for 3 days, and then, you guessed it, resurrected. Then, the film tries to decode the biblical story into, well, astronomical events. It says the star in the east, that's actually the star Sirius. The three kings, that's the three bright stars in Orion's belt. And on December 24th, they all align to point to where the sun will rise, on December 25th, the birth of the sun after the winter solstice. And those 12 disciples, the film argues they're just a stand-in for the 12 constellations of the zodiac. And it doesn't just stop with Jesus. The film then zooms out and claims other huge biblical stories have pre-existing origins too. It says Noah's Ark is basically a retelling of the flood myths from the Epic of Gilgamesh, and that the 10 Commandments were lifted from spell 125 of the Egyptian Book of the Dead. All right, moving on to the film's second part. And this is where it tackles one of the most defining and traumatic events of the 21st century, presenting what became one of its most famous, or infamous, conspiracy theories. The argument here is, well, it's incredibly direct and pretty shocking. Zeitgeist claims that the 9/11 attacks were not a surprise assault by foreign terrorists, but a false flag, a carefully engineered event orchestrated by people inside the U.S. government itself. So, how does it back this up? Zeitgeist points to a bunch of what it calls anomalies. It asks why the towers fell at pretty much the speed of gravity. It points to reports of molten metal found in the rubble weeks later. It highlights that a third building, World Trade Center 7, collapsed that day, even though it was never hit by a plane. And it claims that military exercises happening at the exact same time created total confusion and delayed any real response. So the film sets up this question for the audience. It says, hey, for a building to collapse at freefall speed, something has to get all that concrete and steel out of the way instantly. And the film's answer to its own question is simple. Controlled demolition. Explosives. And that brings us to the final act of the movie. This is where Zeitgeist tries to connect all the dots between religion and war, arguing that the real motive behind everything is money, and more specifically, financial control. You know, the whole money argument in the film really hinges on how it defines a central bank. It claims that by loaning a nation its own money, but with interest attached, you create this inescapable, self-generating cycle of debt. The film flat out calls it a modern form of slavery. Zeitgeist then lays out this specific timeline. It claims that a group of powerful bankers actually manufactured the financial panic of 1907. Why? To scare the public in demanding a central bank to stabilize everything. This, the film says, led to a super-secret meeting on a place called Jekyll Island and, ultimately, to the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913. So according to the film, this system creates this kind of endless cycle that actually needs conflict to survive. It presents major events like the sinking of the Lusitania before World War I or the attack on Pearl Harbor as engineered pretexts, excuses to drag America into huge wars, which in turn forces the government to borrow massive amounts of money from the Federal Reserve, generating enormous profits for the bankers. Okay, so here's where the film tries to tie all three of these giant threads together. It suggests that they are all part of one singular, overarching plan for total global control. And this is where the film drops what it presents as its version of the endgame. It uses an alleged conversation with a member of the Rockefeller family who supposedly said the ultimate goal is to get every single person on the planet implanted with an RFID chip for total control. And to make this feel real and immediate, Zeitgeist points to actual developments. It cites things like the Real ID Act as a first step towards a national tracking system, and it talks about secretive agreements to create a borderless North American Union, complete with a new shared currency called the Amero. So this all leads to the film's, grand unified theory. It argues that all these things, ancient religious myths, modern false flag terror events, and a corrupt banking system, they aren't separate conspiracies at all. They're just different tools used for the exact same purpose, to keep all of us divided, afraid, and in the end, easy to control. And in the end, Zeitgeist kind of steps back from all the conspiracies and details and leaves its audience with this big philosophical choice. It reframes its whole message as a call to action, to reject a reality that's built on fear and division. It's a really provocative end to a film that, whether you agree with it or not, absolutely shaped the conversation for years to come.